the home brewer type ones, those people are passionate enough. I think they'll find a way to make it through in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, if they have enough business acumen. But there's the ones that it's like a lawyer and his 5 dickhead buddies thought it would be cool because they had the money to but they have no fucking idea what they're doing. And I'm specifically trying to grab like examples of like ones I haven't heard of. So if you are a lawyer who has 5 dickhead buddies that bought a brewery, I didn't actually mean you.
Wait a second.
Yeah, I didn't actually mean you because I don't know you exist.
Welcome to the B-Sides and Beers podcast.
Welcome to B-Sides and Beers, episode 75. Tonight we're hanging with Chris, founder and co-owner of Small Gods Brewing out of Sydney, BC. What's going on? Thanks for coming on the show, man.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, excited for this.
Yes, indeed. Some island beer. We don't ever get island breweries on here, so we're always stoked when we got one.
Definitely.
I don't know. They don't like us very much for some reason.
Our messages get lost on the ferry.
Yeah, I don't know what happens there. Chris, we start the show every time by telling everybody what we're drinking. So guests go first as always. What do you got?
Well, it's actually kind of funny. What I currently have is a tequila fresca, which is like the laziest margarita you can ever have. Because it's the early days of a new business. So I work nonstop, and I live about 30 minutes from the brewery. To give you an idea, I live in Victoria, and I kind of was going about doing my thing today, and today's one of the days where, because in the early days, you work every day. There is no day off, but there's days that are like kind of like days off where you work from home and not at the brewery or not driving around delivering beer or whatever it may be. And so I looked at my fridge. I was like, oh, yeah, I got that thing tonight. And I looked at my fridge. I was like, I wonder what beer I'll have. I looked, I'm like, I don't have any beer in the fridge. And I texted my wife because she's at the brewery. I was like, are you coming? Are you going to make it home before 7? And she was like, no. I was like, okay, well, I guess I won't have any of my beer. So I fired up a tequila fresca, like a classy gent.
Nice.
Awesome. That's good. Okay. Mike, we're going to go to you then.
Let's
What
go
do
to
you
me.
got? Yeah.
I got 2 fun ones here. First one here is from Tin Whistle Brewing. It is what is this? Glorious Hazelnut Coffee Milk Stout.
Yes. Let's see that can.
Weird
Tin
glare
Whistle's
there.
always good.
Yeah, so we got that one. And this one is from Steamworks. There we go. That makes more sense. Steamworks, and it is a S'mores Imperial Stout. And the last episode we had, I had the 10.5%.
Yeah.
This one's a 10.5% as well, and I've never seen a stout with that high of alcohol percentage.
Imperials are up there, dude.
Wow.
You're a glutton for punishment, man.
It's
funny actually.
Less, right?
For the longest time, everybody put their Imperials at 11.9 because when you would go to 12, you become considered in the liquor taxation, not the beer taxation. And I think the government got wise to it, and they started testing everybody's 11.9s because it was the old trick of like, a lot of those 11.9s were 14s back in the day. So now everybody's a little more careful to bring that ABV down to where they're not getting a little sus on you.
Back in the glory days when they weren't really checking.
Yeah.
So that's what I got.
Yeah, that's heavy duty. That Imperial, you're gonna need a nap after that one, I think. So
no. Comes down to like I said, do more with less, right?
Absolutely. I'm gonna jump in. I got 2 from Tree Brewing. I haven't had Tree Brewing in a long time because it feels like they haven't had anything new to offer in a long time. But maybe I haven't seen it. But this is a Redwood Amber Ale.
Oh, nice.
Yep. So that's 5%. Slightly sweet and bold, like the towering redwood forests. And the other one I've got from Tree Brewing is a Luna dark fruited ale, which is blueberry, cherry, and plum juice.
Oh yeah.
And it's pretty good. Yeah. Summer meets winter beer. So that is a 5.5%, and that's what I got.
So it's an autumn beer then.
It's an autumn beer,
There
yes,
you
absolutely. So it's a little in the middle of there, but yeah.
Yeah.
Dane, what you got?
Right now I'm working on a Red Truck beer, Golden Hour Cranberry Ale.
Those ones are good.
Really good. And it's not like a punch in the face with a fistful of cranberries. Like it's very subtle, very refreshing. Really like it. And then earlier this week, I came across something called Container Brewing, and it's called Tapestry, but it's their take on a Belgian triple, and it's pretty close. It's pretty good. So it's
Where are they out of?
Containers out of Vancouver. Let me double check that. Yeah.
Yeah, they're
East
East Van. They're not far from Strathcona
Right on.
Brewing. So they're on the west side of Clark Drive, where almost everybody else is on the east side of Clark
Right.
Drive.
Okay. Surprisingly really good. It does taste like a Belgian Trappiste. So this is another heavy hitter, 7.5, and I like it. And then because it's Saturday, I've got a couple more. I've got I've been
Isn't it always Saturday when we're recording this?
well.
Pretty well, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Just checking. It's the days it in Y kind of thing. Yeah.
Just catching up from the week.
Yeah. So I've got I've been quite partial to Driftwood's Fat Tug like everyone else on the island. It's great. It is what it is. And then I was getting into Raised by Wolves, and then Yellow Dog has a really nice IPA called Play Dead. It's kind of in that same sort of high alcohol around. This is a 6.8. Those other ones are around a 7, I think. But I really like Yellow Dog, so I've been I've been getting this one instead. And then I've got my Squirrel Chaser Hazy IPA, which I love dearly.
Goody.
And that's all I got.
That's good. That's a good lineup. Okay, Chris. Yeah, tell us about Small Gods. You mentioned that it's new. You mentioned that you do pretty much everything in the brewery and around the brewery and everything to do with it. Can you just give us a little bit of background on how that kind of all started and how you got into that and got involved?
Yeah, so I've been in the brewing industry since 2009. About I was one of the original founders of Vancouver Craft Beer Week and ran it with my 4 business partners up until the pandemic. And then we sold it over the course of the pandemic to new operators. But that also ended up kind of, my background prior to that was always in marketing, a lot of software, video games, entertainment, music. Funny enough, used to work for Battle Axe Records, in the early 2000s.
Nice.
Yeah. So, and then because of Beer Week, and it was the early days of craft brewing in BC in a lot of cases. I mean, there were craft breweries for sure, but it was kind of the very start of the spark of the boom that happened kind of like post-Olympics. So that led me to working for Central City Red Racer when they were still just a brew pub in Surrey. And then from there, went to Parallel 49 Brewing in its very early days, was the head of marketing there for a couple of years, and then moved to the island and became the director of marketing for Vancouver Island Brewing, and tried my best to, kind of revitalize that brand. For better or worse, that one proved to be a difficult piece to do, but I'm learned a lot in the process, because when you get up in near those kind of C-suite level positions in regional breweries, you learn a lot more about the business than necessarily the silo you're in. So I was very marketing focused up to that point. And because Vancouver Island Brewing was purchased by a gentleman named Bob McDonald, who not only owns Muskoka Brewing in Ontario, as well as Vancouver Island Brewing, but also owns a company called Wakefield Canada, which is the rights holders to manufacture, sell, and distribute castor oil in Canada. We had some rather sophisticated business apparatus behind the scenes that I learned. I joke I kind of got my master's degree in craft brewing under Bob McDonald in the 4 years I was at VIB. And I got a pandemic layoff, which a lot of people, especially in marketing, tend to get. And as a result, I kind of had this idea on the side of my desk for a while before that anyway, and always kind of wondered if I would go do my own thing. And it was sort of the kick in the ass I needed to pull the trigger and like really dive into that business plan and stop having it as something I just kind of updated every now and then on the side of my desk, and really went after it.
Yep.
And, you know, part of it, the idea behind Small Gods Brewing, is that it's actually just a community brewery. It's not intended to try and grow and become a regional brewery where we're selling all over the province and, you know, in different markets and on all that. I mean, we have a bit of a footprint, but it's not the primary focus. My general thought was, one, I don't think you can make those breweries anymore, and not unless you have $20 million to throw at the problem. And that's still one, I don't. Two, it's a big ass gamble that I wouldn't take even if I had the money. And where I saw the opportunities remaining in craft brewing in British Columbia was small towns, you know, places where underserviced that needed community breweries. And so I kind of did an analysis, had a look at what communities were lacking in terms of per capita. And the West Shore was definitely one, which is kind of Langford, Colwood as a combined. They have Millstream Beverage Company, but it's kind of on the side of the highway that's not the population side, not the heaviest, densest population. And then Vernon was one, because if you don't count Okanagan Spring, which I don't, because it's functionally it's beyond regional, it's a macro-owned pseudo-craft.
Yeah.
They have Martin Brew Pub and 40,000 people, and that's it. So they were kind of number two. And then I saw the Peninsula. So Sydney, North Saanich as a combined about 24,000 people. Category 12 is sort of where the cutoff is, because that's like Keating. So that's where you go from being not peninsula to peninsula, is sort of where they land. And then in the time that it took me to open, there also a Nano has opened. Actually, just literally one business separates us. We're in the same building. And so that Nano is called Beacon Brewing. But very different concepts, very different. Like they're all direct to consumer, very mom and pop, no kitchen, no food program. Very nice people. We're friendly. There's no like weird rivalry, but very different business concepts.
Community brewing. Sorry, I just want to kind of like visualize this. This is like 10 hectoliters or less, or is that more just a description of the business model where it's?
Yeah, I mean, I would say in theory you could do it with, you know, the size of brew house is relative. It gives you a good idea. So we are a 10 hectoliter brew house with 20 hec fermenters, 20 hec brights. So everything's double batch. We own our own canning line. We don't do mobile canning. You know, we got a warehouse across the highway. So we're what I would say is sort of hybrid. We're a community brewery, but after seeing what happened during the pandemic and knowing so many people in the industry, thanks to Vancouver Craft Beer Week over the years, I saw the people who were able to, you know, not necessarily even just hang on, but thrive a little during the pandemic, were the ones who had the ability to pivot their business to a wholesale model when the tap room wasn't bustling. And so originally I had a very smaller wholesale side of the business planned, but seeing what happened, I was like, no, I got to be able to pivot if it needs. And also there's some great marketing advantage to being able to put your brand out in X number of liquor stores and all that and the other thing. So I didn't do what a lot of people would call the brass neck model, which is like you do 90% of your volume out of your front door. For those unaware, brass neck is a brewery that's very direct to consumer. They do have a little canning line and stuff, a little one head canner, but they're on Main Street in Vancouver, incredibly popular, owned by the owner of the Alibi Room, which is arguably the most famous craft beer bar in all of British Columbia. Fantastic place, but a lot of people after Brass Neck opened were like, oh, I'm going to go open a Brass Neck. And that was the concept a lot of people put in their heads because you deal with a lot less bullshit. Moving beer around, all the logistics of it, the packaging of beer, all that stuff, that is the shittiest part of this industry, frankly, and the most complicated, the most expensive. So I initially even had a plan that kind of mirrored that a little bit more, but still had some smaller canning capability. And we just changed that a bit, upped our ability to produce volume, got a bigger canning line than I was originally planning, just so I could, kind of do this dual role. But to give you an idea, we would max out our brewery as it stands, at 2,500 hectoliters total annual production, which would put us in the ballpark of I would say two Whistle Boys, two Whistle Boys, or Steel and Oak currently. And that's because Steel and Oak actually had gone bigger, but pulled back and are starting to focus more on their tap room and their, in direct to consumer business. Yeah. And so I kind of see the divide where probably somewhere in the range of a third to half of the business is direct to consumer. And the other half is to a little bit more is going, out primarily in cans, some draft accounts. Mm-hmm. And
cool.
The other idea behind it was to also, because the South Island would sort of lack those ultra premium craft breweries, the ones that you would put in the conversation of a Daggerad, a Superflux, that sort of thing. We wanted to position ourselves that way because island people love island shit.
Right.
So, and no disrespect to any of the other breweries here, but a lot of them, especially on the South Island, weren't really going after that market because, one, we have a disproportionate amount of regional breweries because I think that's why sort of how you had to do things before tap rooms became a thing. And because craft beer, the birthplace of craft beers, Victoria and all this means you have just a lot more breweries that opened and then raced to being regional size because that's how they could survive.
Right.
So now we have 5 regional breweries, but not a town that's big enough to make that make sense, although they all do very well.
Yeah.
But as a result, we don't have a lot of small, more ultra premium, hitting that kind of $18 to $20 4-pack, $5 single can of beer market with where we don't care about cost on goods or hitting the largest possible target audience with the type of beer we're creating.
Right.
We're creating products that are for example, we have a Pilsner, never ending Pilsner that we, it's kind of mine and Johnny's baby in the sense that we do a lot of other things and I think we do them very well, but this is the one that we're obsessed about. And we bring in this Pilsner malt from northern Germany called Barca, which is grown on this heritage farm in northern Germany that's 175 years old and then malted at Weyermann, which is a 250-year-old maltery. Wow. And gives this real European biscuit character. And then we do a dead to rights Pilsner, brew it really well, and then give it 6 weeks tank time. Wow. And we don't filter it. We don't centrifuge it. It's clear because it's sat in tank and lagered properly. And, all these crazy steps, which results in it being an incredibly expensive Pilsner to produce.
Right.
and thus I have to charge for. But I also personally think there's nothing that tastes like it on the market. Like the closest thing you'll find to actual, true, honest to God German beer.
Wow.
Yeah.
The price is justifiable. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, Chris, like out of like all of the guests that we've had on here, there's like a lot of them just like start right from like the brewery. Like they just open up the brewery. Like they're just like, well, we don't know much or whatever it is, but like you've got a lot of background experience and like a lot of different breweries and stuff like that. So you bring a lot of different stuff to the table, a marketing background on that, and a lot of contacts and a lot of, background information that you've got there. So that must have been huge for you too. Hey, like
it's a huge help. 100%. Like I got to learn a lot from countless other breweries, people around me, people who went in blind, people who went in with some knowledge, and I think it shows when sometimes a brand, and you guys may not know this, like, don't get me wrong. There are brands that are fantastic that have done incredibly well that don't have originally a background in this thing, and they've blown it out of the water. They've done an amazing job. Yellow Dog. Mike worked at Best Buy. Financially incredibly, like, he was head office. He was a very good business person, etc. But he wasn't the brewing industry.
Right.
And the owner, like, so there are brands where I'm not saying you need this to do it really well, because that's one of the best operated breweries in the province, right? Yellow Dog / neighborhood. But there are a lot of cases where if you look behind the curtain at some of the brands that you're like, oh, that's a really good brand, there's usually one or two people who actually had done it before for someone else.
Right.
So, great examples, Parkside. That's Vern, who was the brewer at Granville Island Brewing, in the actual, like, on Granville Island, not at Molson. Like, he did the small batch program and designed all their recipes. And Sam Payne, who basically built Red Truck from nothing to when they got to their big brewery.
Wow.
That's Parkside Brewing. And now Rewind is kind of their second brand they've opened.
Okay.
You look at, Brass Neck has Conrad from Steamworks and Nigel, who own craft beer bars. Backcountry, Mark Roberts, who had done sales for a million different, like, really quality brands that you would know, including Steamworks and everything else. So it's one of those things where you're like, it's not, you'd be surprised sometimes when you look behind the curtain at the ones that you probably really admire and go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
there's people who know what they're doing. And like I said, it's not to knock people who don't, because there's a lot of great brands that came out of nowhere. Steel and Oak guys had no idea what they were doing. Yellow Dog, not, any formal business or like brewing business stuff. Like, you can do it without it, but it definitely doesn't
it's
hurt.
hard to believe when you mentioned those two. I mean, especially Yellow Dog, because it's, touted as one of the best beers coming out of BC. And it's funny because just hearing, some of the things that you're talking about. So I'm mid-island right now, and there's been a number of breweries open up over here. And, just kind of circling back to the whole community brew business model. And I'm not a beer connoisseur. I like what I like, and, my knowledge kind of stops there, but it seems to me that, it really is about not just creating an amazing brew or something that is, like expensive to produce and something that has like this heritage of grown on a German 150-year-old German farm. But, a lot of the breweries here, it's just what the community needed. They fill the void, so to speak, and their stuff is decent. They have great atmosphere and people keep going back to them. But outside of that business model, I'm not really sure how much they're even interested in selling on the mainland, for example. I'm not sure if you guys are getting Gladstone or Land and Sea or Ace or
no, man, that's
any
the
of
thing.
that
Like,
stuff.
we get very little. We get Vancouver Island Brewing.
Every once in a while I see an Ace. It's not a ton.
It's very few and far between.
Yeah, Gladstone doesn't go to the mainland.
Yeah.
No, currently, like, they may eventually, because they have an expansion coming, but like Gladstone's actually a great example of the business model that we're trying to do as well, in terms of like what their divide would be, how they're selling in their own house versus out in market. And their model's fantastic as it stands, because they do about what our total goal would be. And they sell it all on the island.
Yeah.
And they sell most of that within 50K.
Yeah,
of Courtney.
exactly.
That's
And it's fine beer. It's great. I do enjoy going there, and but you're right. I mean, they do have a great business model, and they are. I mean, you just see it right now. The whole place is expanded, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the important thing, is to do this. Like, I have a passion for really, that kind of ultra premium beer. And again, I saw the hole in the market. South Island's a little bit different than going just now. Keep in mind, Courtney Comax has blown up in the craft brewing scene, so I'm not trying to disparage it. Like, it's definitely got its own.
It's early days, though.
Competition heavy scene in early days. But I just, part of my thing is I look for what is the hole in the market, so I'm not just coming out and being like, oh, I'm going to try and make a West Coast IPA and compete with Fat Tug, and now I'll make a Pilsner and compete with Hoyne, and I'll do an Amber Ale and compete with Fillet. Like, that would be insane. I don't know why I would launch a brand like that down here. You can get away with different things, but you should go with what you're passionate about. Like, you look at Twin City in Port Alberni, and fantastic beers, very interesting stuffs. And I talked to Aaron, and he's like, sours are some of our best sellers. Yeah. You wouldn't think that, going old Milltown, Port Alberni, and they're just crushing fruited sours like nobody's business. Wow. So like, I think as long as you also do something you're passionate about and present it in a way that you're proud of and create a high quality product, people will come and enjoy it. But I think, that is the thing. What we are ultimately doing, at least for, 50+% of most of our businesses, if you're a community brewery, is you're creating a community living room. You're creating, basically the pub culture we lost over time, or that arguably never even existed in BC. Yeah. And that's really what we're in the business of, is hospitality. Mm-hmm. But we're managing to hedge the bet by having manufacturing attached to it. So if shit hits the fan and the hospitality is not going so well, you can kind of lean on I'm also a manufacturing business.
Right.
Yeah, got this side hustle going here.
Yeah. The community thing is very necessary, I think, especially after everyone's been locked down forever. You kind of want to have, you don't want to sit in your house anymore. You want to get out and do something, and digging into the whole British pub house kind of thing, the public house. It's cool, man.
So Chris, you're talking about like the creating the good brand, or creating the quality product. So can you tell us what do you got on tap right now?
So I think we have 13 beers on tap right now. In general, our goal is always to have 12, give or take. Wow. And how we designed our list with that community in mind is we have verticals that we have to fill. So if something's going off tap, we're trying to replace what that vertical is. So for us, we have 3 cores. That Pilsner I talked about, Never Ending Pilsner, Hazy Pale, Hazy IPA, because IPA is always the answer if it's craft beer in terms of what is your best-selling product. For us, the Pilsner is actually our best-selling product, which is interesting. But over a long enough timeline, unless you are a regional brewery where lagers tend to sell a bit better on a wider mass, like your best-selling product is an IPA. And then from there, with those 3 kind of slots filled, we have 9 other beers that are just changing, rotating, depending on what's, and some may come back, some may get brewed twice in a row because we liked it so much. And under those, we basically have a system where one of those has to always be another fizzy yellow thing, usually a lager, but I caveat it with sometimes I might need to throw a Kolsch or a blonde, something that ferments a little bit faster,
Yeah.
but is crushable. It's beer for the person who just wants a beer, you know. And then we have 3 other hop-driven beers. So whether it be pale ales, double IPAs, other hazy IPA, experimental hops, you name it, you know, something in a hop-driven category. Then 2 sour products, one that tends to be like a little more light and tart, and one that's like more full sour. Usually they're fruited. Sometimes they're dry hops, sometimes et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, the idea is to have a couple sours. A yeast-driven beer, so something in that kind of Belgian-y saison, or, you know, a hef, something like, you know, so something that just fills that gap where yeast is what is the thing creating the most amount of flavor. And then a malt-driven beer. So those are your ambers, your stouts, a lot of your British influence stuffs, you know. And then a nitro beer, which is usually a dessert beer. So something that's good for the Instagram, something that tastes like candy in some cases, you know, pastry stouts. And like, for example, right now we have a nitro chocolate raspberry nitro scone porter where we worked with Sydney Scones, which is a local producer of these like crazy dessert scones.
Yeah, I saw those on the IGs there. That looked pretty awesome.
Yeah, so threw a bunch in the mash tun, which is pretty much just an Instagram thing. You know, like doesn't change anything. It's the raspberry and the chocolate added post fermentation that gives you all that stuff. But and then those rotate, right? So the general idea is because of that list being constructed that way, anybody who walks in the front door can have something they'll like. They might not have 5 things they like. If they're really into beer, they might have 13 things they like or 12 things they like. But, you know, it always keeps you from going, because I've been to places where, like, especially in the States, where you get a lot of like brands that like get really known for one thing. And like, I was fine because I enjoy these things. But like, I went to Bearded Iris in Nashville because I went to the Craft Brewers Conference in Nashville, and we went in and they had hazy IPAs.
That was it.
That was it. They didn't have anything else. They had 12 fucking double, triple, single, blah, 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 all ABVs, you name it, but they had hazy IPAs, which was fine for me. But I think about this and I go, good thing you're in downtown Nashville, because you ain't pulling that off in a lot of places where someone's going to be like, okay, you know, I mean, at least they picked the most popular beer style currently in existence, you know, outside of lager, you know, from a macro sense. So it helps a little.
I might be optimistic, but I mean, we talk about this from time to time as well. Like everything just seems to be a crazy can that's an IPA, but I'm seeing a lot more ESBs. There's a couple of breweries here making some decent cream ales, which I love. So, I mean, it seems like we're sort of getting over the hump of the hazy hump, or the IPA hump, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I think part of it is at some point, like everybody will try and do the one thing, but like at some point you go, well, are you any good at it? Right. And
right.
At the end of the day, you know, there comes a point where, like, you know, if you're not that great at making them, at some point, everybody will give you a try, but they're not going to keep reordering. And so you got to find your niche again to fill the hole in the market that makes sense for you. So, you know, if you're not a brand that's known to produce high quality hazy IPAs, sours, or whatever, you got to get in where you fit in, if at least when it comes to distribution. And so, you know, you could go, well, maybe I do crush really good cream ales. You know, there's a market for it. Like there's not, if there's 45 breweries competing for that same, you know, market, but I think enough people are starting to find the equilibrium, right? Where you go, what am I good at? what will my brand support, and where do I go from there? And I mean, with Small Gods, I admit I challenged Johnny pretty hard to go, the brand I admire the most from a product standpoint is a brewery out of Hood River, Oregon called Freem, spelled with a P-F, Freem. But the one thing about Freem, who often win like GABF Small Brewery of the Year, Medium Brewery of the Year, they're always on a list of like primo breweries, is the thing, unlike a lot of breweries that like good on those lists, those breweries tend to have like, oh, you're like Treehouse Brewing and you make tons of really good, hazy IPAs, or you're really known for XYZ. Freem makes everything and all of its bangers.
Okay.
You just know if you're getting a Freem, I don't care what they made. They could make a cream ale, can make a Japanese rice lager, they can make a hazy IPA. I know that shit's going to be great. And so that's what I challenged Johnny. I was like, if I gave you no barrier based on cost on goods or time to do the research or whatever, can you just make the best damn beer possible within these verticals? And so far, we have had a fairly, I would say, for being 5 months into this thing, which is also very hard because normally it takes a few months to figure out the ghost in the machine and get your processes in order. Usually a brewery within its first 6 months is not as good as it's going to be. Some cases they are, some cases they're not, but I feel like we've already developed a strong reputation for pretty much whatever you get from Small Gods. There isn't duds, even though we do a wide variety of things. So that's really hard to do, but it's what I would like our brand to be known for.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Very inspiring.
Yeah. Chris, what do you think is the biggest challenge facing the industry right now?
Some levels oversaturation,
Right.
some levels lack of knowledge about what industry we're in within the operators, how to operate these businesses. These are very hard businesses to operate.
Oh, yeah.
Like incredibly hard, because again, this goes back to the joy of it is, yeah, you can pivot and you can try and find ways to, if your tap room's not humming, you can try and go find wholesale and this, that, and the other thing. But that also means you're operating a manufacturing business, a hospitality business, a distribution business. You have so many elements to this business you have to be good at.
Yeah.
It's very complex, and not everybody's ready for how complex it is. And so when you see this many brands on the market, especially the ones that aren't really built to be these community things, like I think a lot of the ones actually kind of north of the Malahat, a lot of ones in small towns and more rural places in British Columbia, all of them in theory should be fine. Because you're like, oh, a great example is I grew up in a town called Rossland in, the West Kootenays, and 2,500 people on the side of a mountain. And they have a little brewery called Rossland Brewing, and it cranks because it's the community living room, and they're great, and the operators are fine, and like I have no concerns about them and their future. But you get to like some of the places, especially in greater Vancouver or more populated areas or more areas where there's competition. Kelowna right now is seeing a huge growth in how many breweries are popping up.
Yeah, definitely.
And that gets tough because not all of them are going to be bangers. And now they're all competing because, like, okay, maybe their tap room's not as busy or whatever, and now they're all trying to compete for shelf space at not just their local liquor store, but now they're all fighting over every, draft line and whatever across their general area, and they can't go too far because that's really expensive and more complicated. And so you have these things where you're seeing breweries open, close, get bought, reopen, whatever. You see these waves of things happening, and it is a very challenging business to be in. And I think if you're not in it for the love of the game It's not a great business to be in
Right.
because it's tough. Like in a lot of cases, you're going to spend $2.5 million to buy yourself a $60,000 a year job.
Yeah.
It's interesting how you sort of highlight these factors in the equation, and it almost seems as though because I've paid my dues in the service industry, and I know the amount of resources that go towards like a tap room or running a kitchen and front house and all of that stuff. It almost seems like you're responsible to be doing both, right? Like to be brewing beer and the logistics involved with that, the marketing, all of that stuff. And then you have what seems to be almost like an uncontrollable kind of like other side of the business, which can be affected by pandemics or a cook gone awry or whatever. Rising house prices, and no one can afford to have those jobs anymore. It almost seems like it's you got a double strike against you just off the bat there.
Yeah, and I think there is going to be attrition in the coming year or so. Like we're not even looking at a recession. We're in a recession.
Yep.
Like if you haven't figured that out yet, it's because it just hasn't landed at your door.
Yeah.
But I see it because I have taproom sales numbers to show me it. And friends who I talked to about said how their tap rooms and various other things are going. And you see the odd thing pop up on the news about how like Black Friday in every mall is a ghost town.
Right.
Like this shit's going to be hard. And I think there's a lot of people who, this is no ill will statement towards them, but they got into it for the wrong reason. It was like, there was one dude who kind of like, in a lot of cases, actually, I shouldn't even say this, the home brewer type ones, those people are passionate enough. I think they'll find a way to make it through in some cases, hopefully if they have enough business acumen. But there's the ones that it's like a lawyer and his 5 dickhead buddies thought it would be cool because they had the money to but they have no fucking idea what they're doing. And I'm specifically trying to grab like examples of like ones I haven't heard of. So if you are a lawyer who has 5 dickhead buddies about a brewery, I didn't actually mean you.
Wait a second.
Yeah. I didn't actually mean you because I don't know you exist. But it's one of those things like they saw the growth in the industry and probably thought, I'm going to make a bunch of money and I'm going to have my beer this place and that place. And, I know these guys and I know this guy at Cactus Club and they'll bring our beer on and blow it. And then reality fucking kicks in. And they've been riding pandemic, government money for 2 years. And that shit's all gone now. And they might have leveraged that into another loan and a whatever. They're not going to survive the winter.
Yeah.
I don't think, because this is going to be a dark winter. And I even see it as a brand new business because we opened 5 months late. I wanted to open in March of 2022. And then reality kicks in. You're building, construction, that entire side of, that's the other side of trying to do this. Even getting opens
Just
complicated and a giant nightmare.
Yeah.
And so instead of opening and building the brand through a summer where you get good taproom sales and all this, we launched hard into the dead season in Sydney. Because Sydney is a fairly sleepy town 6 months of the year. Because it's not just the fact that it's full of retirees, but those retirees pick up and they go to Palm Springs.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's a fair bit of money, there's a good population. There are young families and various things that are coming out and supporting us and helping, but the tap room isn't doing what I want it to do at this point. Now, the good news is I have the canning line. We are growing our wholesale side of the business like crazy. We're building the reputation of the brand. I think we make it through. It's going to suck, but we're going to make it through this winter and, we'll lick our wounds when things start picking back up because we've done the hard work to build the brand and get people excited to come out and check us out. And when the boats all come back, because Sydney's a giant marina town, and when all those tourists start landing back at YYJ, and all the boats coming off, from the mainland are full, dropping at Schwartz Bay, will, be rewarded for the work we put in.
This is like
Right.
You're right there too, aren't you? You're right by the ferry terminal, eh?
Yeah, it's 10 minutes from the airport, 10 minutes from the ferry terminal.
Beauty.
The U.S. ferry terminal is practically in the town.
there you go.
Like,
Yeah. It's like Rocky IV when you explain it that way, man. You're just in the barn doing those like sit-ups with the yoke. And like once
Yeah.
summer comes, you're going to be ready.
yeah. Well, it's because, it sucks right now. Like, but I look and go, this is the benefit on the other side.
Yeah.
Is okay. Didn't get the taproom business we wanted to build the brand, to gain the loyalty, to get the people out, to, have things rolling through the winter. So we got to wait for another summer to get that really built properly. So as a result, we're probably, based on projections, we're probably 3 years into our wholesale side of the business plan, 4 months into doing wholesale, So it's caused us to go do a lot of hard work and like think about how to do this appropriately and, build parts of the business that we weren't necessarily thinking we would build as quickly. But if we do that, we could end up find ourselves by the end of the year being 2.5 years into the total plan because the first 6 months sucked.
Right.
And instead of crying about it, we did the work.
And you're agile about it. And like the people that help you get there, if they stay on, you've got yourself a great company, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Is there kind of go into that too, Chris? Like, is there anything? Because again, you're coming in with a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge. Is there anything that caught you off guard that you're like, I did not expect that to happen?
Well, a lot of it is really like just
Besides the recession, sorry.
Yeah. It's the recession part, inflation parts, the unprecedented staffing shortage in the hospitality industry. Like a lot of these things were just unpredictable factors. Like I generally thought, and to a degree, I knew no plans work out exactly as you plan them. But like my general plan was launch about March, all restrictions should be gone, which they were.
Yeah.
Go into a place where like the economy is not just, recovering, it's booming thanks to people being like, oh my God, we're open, things are great, everybody's rolling. And instead what we got was, you're not going to have staff. Also, if you have staff, you're paying them way more than you ever thought you were going to. Yeah. Oh, by the way, lettuce is $11 a head for iceberg. Like shit like that, where you're like, okay, and everybody's going through it. So I'm not crying about it, but it's not what I planned for, and we are going to see a lot of businesses eat it, like it's going to be a rough year or two. But these things also happen. And then as a result, you have stronger businesses that come out the other side. And opportunities for new things to happen, and rent rates go down and labor normalizes or steadies. I'm also not someone who's trying to I'm actually actively trying to create a business where we take care of people and, do the best we can for our employees and have benefits and, do this, that, and the other thing. So I'm not even really pissing and moaning about that side of it, but, still not quite what I expected. Where I thought I was going to be paying people pretty damn good. Now I'm just kind of paying people what they should be paid.
Right.
Because that's what I can afford because it's a brand new business.
Right.
Yeah. But at least you have people there.
Yes.
Which is huge, it sounds like, these days.
Exactly.
Yeah. Hey, Chris, it was super nice to talk to you. We got a lot of information. One of the more knowledgeable guests we've had actually on this show. So we thank you for that and for your time, because I learned a ton.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, super happy to be here, guys.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And next time we're out there, and Dane, you got to get down there and check that
absolutely.
out. Yeah, because it sounds like you got a lot of good things going on there. So thanks again, Chris.
Yeah, thank you.
you.
All right, we want you guys to subscribe, share, and review this podcast. Keep it going, keep it strong, because we're having a great time entertaining you guys with B-Sides and Beers podcast.